The universe tore itself apart. Commander William Adama felt it before the alarm screamed. A wrongness in his bones, a fundamental violation of the laws that governed reality. The Battlestar Galactica shuddered like a living thing in agony, her massive hull groaning as forces that shouldn't exist pulled at her structure from impossible angles. Around him, the CIC erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouted reports, hands flying across consoles that flickered and sparked. The Dratis display, the lifeline that had kept them alive through countless Cylon ambushes, went from stable tracking to static-filled nightmare in the span of 3 heartbeats. "Report!" Adama's voice cut through the noise with the authority of a man who'd commanded in the crucible of extinction. Colonel Saul Tighe grabbed the railing beside him, his weathered face tight with an emotion Adama recognized immediately. Fear masked by anger. "FTL drive just dumped us out of jump, but the navigation computer is screaming errors. Sir, we're not where we're supposed to be." Define not where we're supposed to be. Adama moved to the main display, his mind already calculating contingencies, escape routes, defensive positions. Years of fighting the Cylons had taught him to think 3 moves ahead, even when reality itself seemed to be collapsing. Lieutenant Felix Gaeta looked up from his station, and the expression on his face made Adama's stomach drop. The young officer was brilliant, unflappable under pressure, the kind of man who could calculate jump coordinates while the ship burned around him. Right now, he looked lost. "Commander, we're not in known space, at all. The star patterns don't match anything in our navigation database. Not the 12 colonies, not any of the fleet's projected jump routes, not even the deep survey data from before the fall." Gaeta's hands moved across his console, pulling up star charts that meant nothing, constellations that had never existed in colonial space. "It's like we jumped into a completely different region of the galaxy, except that's impossible. Our FTL couldn't have carried us that far." "Could the Cylons have done something?" Captain Lee Apollo Adama appeared on the command deck, still in his flight suit, sweat staining the collar. He'd been in the ready room when the jump went wrong, and he'd sprinted to CIC the moment alarms started. "Some kind of weapon that displaced us?" "No Cylon activity on Dratis," the duty officer reported, then paused. "No activity at all, actually. Sir, the board is completely empty. No ships, no debris, no background radiation signatures. It's like space here is clean." Too clean, Adama thought, but didn't say. In the months since the fall, since the Cylons had destroyed the 12 colonies and hunted humanity to near extinction, they'd never encountered space this empty. There was always something. Wreckage, dust clouds, the faint traces of stellar winds and cosmic radiation that filled the void between stars. This was different. This felt sterile. Wrong. "Get me fleet-wide communications," Adama ordered. "I want status reports from every ship, damages, casualties, FTL capability, and someone find out what the frack happened to our jump coordinates." The next 10 minutes were controlled pandemonium. Reports flooded in from the refugee fleet. Civilian ships packed with the last survivors of humanity, each one carrying souls who'd already lost everything once, and now faced the terror of being lost in unknown space. Most had sustained minor damage during the catastrophic jump. A few had injured crew from the violent transition, but all were accounted for, all were functional. Small mercies in a universe that had stopped offering them. "Commander," Gaeta's voice carried a strange note, not quite fear, but something close to wonder mixed with dread. "You need to see this." The Dratis display had cleared, the static resolving into something that made no sense at all. A massive structure hung in space ahead of them. Not a ship, though it had artificial elements clearly visible even at this distance. Not a station in the conventional sense. It looked like... "Is that a moon?" Tighe breathed. It was. Impossibly, inexplicably, a planetary satellite hung in deep space where no moon had any right to exist. Craters marked its gray surface, and built into that surface, clustered around what appeared to be a massive crater complex, were structures. habitats, launch bays, energy signatures that registered as fusion reactors and life support systems. Someone had built a base on a moon that was floating alone in the void. How is that possible? Apollo had moved to stand beside his father, staring at the impossible sight. Moons don't just drift through space, they orbit planets. Contact, the communications officer interrupted. We're being hailed. Audio only, tight beam transmission, human language, but the dialect is odd, old. Like listening to historical recordings from before the colonies. Adama felt something shift in his chest. Human. Another group of humans, here in this impossible place. Survivors? Colonists from some lost expedition? Or something else entirely? Put it through, he ordered. Static crackled for a moment, then cleared. The voice that emerged was male, controlled, carrying the tone of someone accustomed to command but not comfortable with it. The voice of a man who'd been thrust into leadership rather than seeking it. Unknown vessel, this is Commander John Koenig of Moonbase Alpha. You've entered our space without identification or authorization. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Adama exchanged glances with Ty. Moonbase Alpha. A human settlement built on a moon that shouldn't exist. Eyes in space that shouldn't be habitable. Either they'd stumbled onto something extraordinary, or they jumped into a situation even more dangerous than the Cylon pursuit they'd been fleeing. He gestured for the communications officer to open a channel. Commander Koenig, this is Commander William Adama of the Battlestar Galactica, Colonial Fleet. We are refugees from the 12 colonies of Kobol. Our faster-than-light drive malfunctioned during a jump, and we've been displaced into unknown space. We mean no harm to you or your base. We're simply trying to understand where we are and how to get home. Silence stretched for 5 heartbeats. 10. 15. When Koenig's voice returned, it carried a note of barely controlled disbelief. Repeat that last part. You're from where? The 12 colonies of Kobol. Unified worlds in the Seranus star system. Or at least, they were unified before the Cylons destroyed them. Adama kept his voice level, professional, though every instinct screamed that something was very wrong about this conversation. Commander, we've been traveling for months searching for a new home for our people. We have nearly 50,000 refugees aboard civilian vessels in our fleet. If you could provide navigation data or assist us in determining our location— Wait. Koenig's voice had gone flat. Stop. You're telling me you're from another star system, that you have faster-than-light travel, that you have thousands of people aboard multiple vessels? Now it was Adama's turn to pause. The way Koenig asked those questions suggested something fundamental was wrong with his assumptions. Commander, what year is it by your calendar? And what planet does your moon orbit? The pause that followed was longer, much longer. Commander Adama, Koenig said finally, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering news he still didn't quite believe himself. We don't orbit a planet anymore. Moonbase Alpha was an Earth-lunar installation, a research and development complex on humanity's moon, in orbit around our homeworld. 3 years ago, waste disposal areas on the far side of the moon underwent a catastrophic chain reaction. The explosion was powerful enough to tear the moon out of Earth's orbit and send it into deep space. That's impossible, Ty said quietly beside Adama. The energy required to— We know, Koenig interrupted, having apparently heard him. Believe me, we know. Our scientists have been trying to understand it for 3 years. The moon accelerated impossibly fast, passed out of the solar system, and has been traveling through space ever since. We've encountered phenomena, spatial anomalies, things that defy every law of physics we thought we understood. And now you're here, claiming to be from another star system entirely, appearing out of nowhere in a way our sensors have never registered before. Adama felt the pieces clicking together in his mind, forming a picture that was both incredible and terrifying. You're saying your base, this moon, it's been traveling through space for 3 years, encountering anomalies? Yes, and you just appeared through one of those anomalies. Commander, I don't know what brought you here or how, but I can tell you this. Nothing about the moon's journey has been random. We've passed through regions of space that shouldn't exist, encountered forces that can't be explained by conventional science. Whatever displaced you, it's connected to whatever's been guiding us." Before Adama could process that revelation, Gaeta called out urgently from his station. "Commander, energy signature building at bearing 273 Mark 8. It matches the pattern we registered during our jump. Something else is coming through." "On screen," Adama ordered, his hand instinctively moving to the comm that would trigger action stations. Space twisted, the same sickening distortion they'd experienced during their jump, but visible now from the outside, reality bending like light through water. Eye colors bleeding into spectra that human eyes weren't meant to perceive. And then they emerged. Sleek metallic shapes that Adama would recognize anywhere, in any universe, in any nightmare that had haunted him since the fall of the colonies. "Cylons," he said quietly, and the word fell into the CIC like a stone into still water. But these weren't the Cylons he knew. The Raiders were similar in basic configuration, that distinctive double-pronged shape that made them look like metallic scorpions, but different in detail, sleeker, more refined, and marked with symbols that Adama had never seen in colonial intelligence reports, glowing with an eerie light that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. "Multiple contacts," the Dratus officer reported, his voice rising. 12, no, 18, no, contacts are still emerging. I count 24 Raiders and, gods, Commander, we've got 2 base stars coming through. On the display, the massive Cylon capital ships materialized from the distortion. But like the Raiders, they were wrong. The basic Y-shaped configuration was recognizable, but these ships were larger, more heavily armed, and covered in technology that colonial intelligence had never catalogued. "What are those?" Apollo asked, staring at the ships with professional assessment despite the fear in his eyes. "Cylons," Adama repeated. "Machine intelligence that turned on its creators and destroyed our civilization. They've been hunting us across the galaxy for months, trying to finish what they started." He turned to Ty. "Action stations. Launch the alert fighters. All batteries prepare to engage." "Commander Adama." Koenig's voice cut through the rising chaos, and now it carried the steel of a man making hard decisions in impossible circumstances. "Those ships, they're hostile?" "Extremely." "Then we have a problem. Moonbase Alpha isn't a military installation. We have defensive capabilities, but nothing designed to fight a fleet action. If those ships attack..." He didn't need to finish. Adama could see it on the tactical display. Moonbase Alpha was a sitting target, a static position with limited weapons. The Cylons would tear through it in minutes if they chose to attack, which meant Adama had a choice to make. He'd spent months keeping the refugee fleet alive, making ruthless decisions about who to save and who to leave behind, prioritizing the survival of the species over individual lives. But Moonbase Alpha was an unknown. These people weren't colonial. They might be enemies. At minimum, they were a complication. The tactically sound decision would be to jump away immediately, leave Alpha to its fate, preserve the fleet. But they were human. That base held human lives, people who'd survived their own catastrophe, who'd been traveling through impossible space for 3 years trying to find their way home. And Adama had seen enough death, had made enough hard choices, had abandoned enough people. Not today. "Launch all Vipers," he ordered. "Alert fighters engage immediately, full squadrons to follow. All fleet vessels are to take defensive positions around Moonbase Alpha. Someone get me firing solutions on those base stars." He turned back to the communications station. "Commander Koenig, we're going to defend your base. If you have fighters or defensive systems, now would be a good time to use them. You'd risk your fleet for people you just met." Koenig's voice carried genuine surprise. "We're human," Adama said simply. "So are you. That's enough." Across the fleet, pilots scrambled to their Vipers. In the launch tubes, Captain Kara Starbuck Thrace was already strapped into her cockpit, running pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency while her hands shook slightly from adrenaline. "All right, Nuggets." Her voice crackled over the squadron frequency. forcing bravado into her tone because that's what her pilots needed to hear. "We've got Cylons and we've got unknown friendlies. Standard engagement protocols: protect the civilians, kill the toasters, try not to die. Apollo, you're with me on the lead element. Hot Dog, Cat, now take your sections and cover the flanks. Let's show these machines why humanity doesn't quit." Starbuck, Apollo. Lee Adama's voice came through with the calm professionalism that had made him CAG, Commander Air Group, despite being the old man's son. "We've got launchers opening on that moon base. Looks like they do have fighters. Small craft, not like Vipers. Be ready for unknown elements in the engagement space." "Copy that, Apollo. And hey." Starbuck's Viper launched from the tube, the electromagnetic catapult hurling her into space at punishing acceleration. At least it's not boring. Behind her, 3 squadrons of Colonial Vipers screamed into the void, their pilots already picking targets, already calculating angles and velocities with the skill born from months of desperate combat. On Moonbase Alpha, klaxons wailed through corridors that had known too many emergencies in 3 impossible years. Commander John Koenig watched his tactical display with the grim recognition of a man who'd faced the unknown too many times. Beside him, Professor Victor Bergman, Alpha's chief scientist and Koenig's closest advisor, studied the incoming ships with scientific fascination, fighting against very rational fear. "Those vessels," Bergman said quietly, his refined British accent somehow steadying in its very civility. "They're not like anything we've encountered. The technology is remarkably advanced, but the design philosophy is alien. Not literally alien, mind you, but certainly not human in origin. Look at the symmetry, the redundant systems. They're built by machine intelligence, aren't they?" That's what Adama said. Cylons. Machines that destroyed their civilization. Koenig turned to the communications officer. "Get me Alan Carter. Tell him to scramble every eagle we can put in space, and someone wake up Dr. Russell. We're about to have casualties." "Eagles launching," the officer reported moments later. "Commander Carter has 4 birds in space already, 8 more following." On the tactical display, the smaller craft that had emerged from Alpha's launch bays were immediately recognizable as different from the Colonial Vipers. Bulkier, less agile looking, with a design philosophy that screamed exploration and utility rather than pure combat capability. But they flew with skill that spoke of pilots who'd survived 3 years of impossible dangers. Alan Carter's voice came through, and carrying his characteristic Australian drawl, but undercut with combat tension. "Command, Carter, we've got visual on the bogies. Lords, there's a lot of them. And that big ship, the Battlestar, she's moving to cover us. These colonial people are actually going to fight for us." "Then make sure we return the favor, Alan," Koenig replied. "Coordinate with their fighter commander. Call sign is Apollo, apparently. Apollo, Carter. You're the military man here. How do you want to play this?" There was a pause. Then Lee Adama's voice came through, professional and clear. "Carter, your Eagles don't look built for dogfighting. Stay high, provide overwatch and long-range support. My Vipers will engage the raiders directly. If any break through to attack the base or the civilian ships, you intercept." "Can you do that?" "We've done tougher," Carter replied, and there was steel in his voice. "Eagles, you heard the man. Formation Delta. Let's show these tinheads that Alpha doesn't roll over." The Cylons opened fire. Space erupted in streams of kinetic rounds and energy weapons, the raider formations sweeping toward the colonial fleet and Moonbase Alpha with mechanical precision. They flew in perfect coordination, each ship's movements complementing the others in patterns that no human pilot could match. They met the Vipers head-on. Starbuck rolled her fighter into a climb that would have grayed out an untrained pilot, her targeting computer screaming lock warnings as a raider painted her with fire control. She jinked left, pulled hard right, and felt rounds pass close enough that her proximity alarms shrieked. The raider followed with inhuman precision, predicting her movements, compensating for her evasive maneuvers. "Frack," she muttered, pushing her Viper into a spin that sent her inner ear into rebellion. "These toasters are better than the ones back home." "Starbuck, break right!" Apollo's voice, urgent. She broke without thinking, pure trust in her CAG's judgment. An energy beam seared through the space where she'd been, close enough that her canopy polarized against the glare. Apollo's Viper swept past, his guns tracking smoothly, and the raider pursuing her disintegrated in a flash of superheated metal. "Thanks, Apollo. I owe you a drink. Just stay alive to buy it." The battle became chaos given form. Vipers and eagles dancing through streams of weapons fire, the Cylons pressing their attack with relentless efficiency. The colonial pilots flew with the desperate skill of survivors who'd learned that hesitation meant death. The Alpha pilots flew with the adaptability of explorers who'd faced the impossible and lived. And slowly, grudgingly, they began to work together. "Eagle 4, you've got a bandit on your 6. Hot Dog's voice crackled. "I see him, Colonial. Little busy right now." Carter's reply, strained. "On it." Cat's Viper dropped from above, guns blazing, shredding the raider before it could fire. "Much obliged, Colonial. Name's Cat, and you fly pretty good for a cargo hauler." "Cargo hauler." Carter's laugh was genuine despite the circumstances. "Lady, I've threaded this bird through spatial anomalies that would turn your hair white. Now shut up and help me kill these things." But the eagles were taking losses. One spiraled away, an trailing atmosphere, its pilot ejecting in a survival pod. Another took a direct hit that vaporized half its hull, killing the crew instantly. These weren't combat craft, and their pilots, for all their skill, weren't trained for warfare. Aboard Galactica, Adama watched the tactical display with the cold calculation of a commander weighing lives against objectives. The Vipers were holding their own, but the Cylons had numbers and coordination that was grinding down the colonial fighters. Moonbase Alpha's defensive batteries were firing, their railgun emplacements and missile systems adding to the defensive fire. But it wasn't enough. The base stars were moving into firing position, their heavy weapons preparing to reduce both Galactica and Alpha to debris. "All batteries," Adama ordered, his voice carrying the weight of decision. "Target the lead base star. Concentrate fire. Flak batteries. Provide screening fire for our fighters. And get me the FTL status. I want to know if we can jump out if this goes badly." "FTL is still recalibrating after the displacement," Gaida reported. "We'd need at least 10 minutes for a safe jump." 10 minutes. An eternity in combat. But Adama had faced worse odds. "Then we fight," he said simply. "All ships, weapons free. Show these machines what happens when you back humans into a corner." Galactica's main batteries opened up, dozens of gun turrets tracking in unison, pouring fire into space. The kinetic rounds streaked toward the base star, impacting against its hull in cascading explosions. The Cylon ship's armor held, but cracks were forming, systems failing under the sustained barrage. The second base star returned fire, and Galactica shuddered as nuclear-tipped missiles detonated against her flanks. Damage reports flooded in. Hull breaches on multiple decks, fires in the port hangar bay, casualties in engineering. But the old girl held. Galactica had been built to take punishment, designed in an era when war with the Cylons had been a constant threat. She'd survived the fall of the colonies, had fought running battles across half the galaxy. A few nuclear missiles weren't going to bring her down. "All civilian ships, get behind Galactica's defensive perimeter," Ty ordered over the fleet-wide channel. "We'll hold the line. Just stay out of the firing solution." On Moonbase Alpha, the base shuddered as near misses from Cylon weapons detonated against the lunar surface. Rock and regolith fountained into space in slow-motion plumes. One of the defensive railgun emplacements took a direct hit, its crew killed instantly. In Alpha's command center, Koenig watched his home, this impossible moon that had become sanctuary for 300 humans lost in space, come under attack by enemies from another universe. Beside him, Bergman was frantically analyzing the weapon signatures, the tactical patterns, trying to understand the technology, even as it tried to kill them. "Commander," Bergman said urgently, "the Cylons aren't just attacking randomly. Look at their targeting priorities. They're focusing on our sensor arrays, our long-range communication systems. They're trying to blind us, not destroy us." Koenig stared at the tactical display, seeing the pattern Bergman had identified. "Why would they want to capture us? We're not a military target. We're a research base on a drifting moon." "Unless," Bergman said slowly, his scientific mind leaping ahead, "they know something we don't. Something about why we're here. About what Alpha represents." Before Koenig could respond, a new alarm shrieked through the command center. "Commander," the sensor officer shouted. "Massive energy buildup in the spatial anomaly. The same signature that brought the colonials here. Something else is coming through." On every display, across both Galactica and Alpha, sensors registered the impossible. Space was tearing open again, reality bending as something massive forced its way through dimensions. For one terrible moment, everyone, Colonial, Alpha personnel, even the Cylons, stopped and stared. Then the distortion stabilized, and what emerged made Adama's blood run cold. A third base star. But this one was different, larger, more heavily armed, covered in technology that even the enhanced Cylons didn't possess, and broadcasting on every frequency, in every language, a message that carried the cold certainty of machine logic. "Human vessels, you will surrender. Moonbase Alpha will be secured. Resistance will result in total extermination." Adama met Koenig's eyes across the communication link. Two commanders, two civilizations, facing an enemy neither had chosen, but both would have to fight. "Commander Koenig," Adama said quietly, "I think we need to talk, fast." "Agreed," Koenig replied, "because I don't think the Cylons followed you here by accident. I think they came for us, for Alpha, and we need to figure out why before they take it." The Cylon fleet moved with inhuman precision. Captain Kara, Starbuck Thrace, had fought the Toasters for months, had learned their patterns, their tactics, the cold mathematical efficiency that made them so deadly. But these Cylons were different. Enhanced. Their formations shifted and adapted in real time, learning from every engagement, compensating for every tactic the colonial pilots threw at them. And they were winning. Her Viper screamed through a cloud of weapons fire, the proximity alarms a constant wail that she'd learned to tune out. Two raiders on her tail, their targeting computers predicting her moves with unnerving accuracy. She pulled into a vertical climb that would have been suicide against human opponents, making herself a perfect target against the black void of space, then killed her engines and spun 180, bringing her nose guns to bear on the pursuing raiders. The first one exploded, her rounds finding the sweet spot between armor plates. The second adapted instantly, breaking off its pursuit vector and spiraling away before she could adjust her aim. "Frack!" She punched the throttle, her Viper leaping forward as more raiders converged on her position. "Apollo, I could use some help here." "Little busy, Starbuck." Lee Adama's voice was tight with concentration. On her tactical display, she could see his Viper locked in a turning fight with 3 raiders, each one trying to get position while he kept them all in his kill zone through sheer flying skill. "Hot Dog, you're closest. Get her clear." "On it, CAG. Brendan Hot Dog." Costanza's Viper swept in from above, his guns blazing, forcing the raiders pursuing Starbuck to scatter. "Starbuck, break left and climb. I'll take the trailer." She followed his direction without hesitation, trusting in the teamwork that had kept them alive through impossible odds. Behind her, Hot Dog's guns found their target, another raider reduced to debris and expanding gas. But for every Cylon they killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Eagles were suffering worse. These weren't combat craft. They were exploration and rescue vehicles pressed into a fight they were never designed for. Their pilots flew with courage and skill born from 3 years of navigating spatial anomalies and cosmic phenomena that would have killed lesser crews. But courage couldn't compensate for the fundamental mismatch. Alan Carter's Eagle took a hit that sent it spinning, alarms shrieking as systems failed. He fought the controls, his co-pilot frantically rerouting power, trying to restore maneuvering capability before the next raider made its kill run. "Command, Eagle 1 is hit." Carter's voice crackled through the static of damaged communications. "Lost starboard thruster. Port is failing. I'm dead in the water." On Moonbase Alpha's command deck, John Koenig watched his best pilot, his friend, become a sitting target for machines that showed no mercy. His hand moved toward the communications panel, preparing to order a rescue attempt, knowing it would cost more lives, but unable to simply watch Carter die. Then a voice cut across the command frequency, female, sharp with controlled aggression, carrying the accent of someone who'd grown up fighting. "Eagle 1, this is Starbuck. I've got you covered. Just keep that brick flying for another 30 seconds. Carter looked up through his canopy and saw the Colonial Viper dropping from above like a hawk on prey. The pilot, this Starbuck, flew with a recklessness that bordered on insanity, putting her fighter directly between Carter's crippled Eagle and the incoming raiders. 3 Cylons converged on her position. She should have been overwhelmed, cut down in seconds by their coordinated fire. Instead, she danced. Her Viper spun and weaved through weapons fire with movements that seemed to defy physics, each maneuver flowing into the next with an artistry that transcended mere skill. She wasn't flying the fighter. She was part of it, human and machine, merged into something greater than either alone. The first raider disintegrated under her guns. The second tried to break off, and she stayed with it through a turn that would have grayed out an unaugmented pilot, her shot stitching across its hull until it came apart. The third attempted to use the debris as cover, and she anticipated the move, already positioned for the kill when it emerged. "Eagle 1, you're clear," she announced, her breathing barely elevated despite the combat intensity. "Get that bird back to base. Carter, was it?" "That's right." Carter's voice carried genuine awe beneath the Australian drawl. "And thanks. That was some of the best flying I've ever seen. Just doing my job." Starbuck's tone shifted, became more serious. "But Carter, you need to listen. Your Eagles aren't built for this. Your exploration craft trying to dogfight with purpose-built war machines. Your people are brave as hell, but you're getting chewed up out here." "Tell me something I don't know," Carter replied, finally getting his crippled Eagle pointed back toward Alpha. "But we can't just abandon the fight. This is our home they're attacking." "I know, but there's a difference between courage and suicide." Starbuck paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a different quality. Understanding born from too many friends lost to impossible odds. "Pull your Eagles back to defensive positions around the base. Provide cover fire and intercept anything that gets through our screen. Let the Vipers handle the raiders. This is what we do. This is what we were built for." On Alpha's command deck, Koenig met Victor Bergman's eyes. The professor nodded slightly. The tactical assessment was sound, even if it stung their pride to accept help. "Commander Carter," Koenig said into the comm, "do it. Defensive formation around Alpha. Conserve your birds for intercept duty. Let the Colonials take the main engagement." "Understood, Command." Carter's acknowledgement carried relief beneath the professional tone. "Eagles, you heard the commander. Form up on me. We're going home defense." The tactical situation shifted. The Eagles withdrew to positions close to Alpha's surface, their weapons trained outward, ready to intercept any raiders that broke through the Viper screen. It freed the Colonial pilots to push forward, to take the fight directly to the Cylons without worrying about protecting the slower, less maneuverable craft. The tide began to turn. Aboard Galactica, Commander Adama watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction as his pilots did what they'd been trained for since childhood: fight, survive, win. But satisfaction was tempered by the grim mathematics of attrition. They destroyed dozens of raiders, but the Cylons had reinforcements still emerging from the spatial anomaly. The base stars were pounding Galactica's armor with nuclear weapons and kinetic rounds that were slowly degrading the old Battlestar's defensive capability. And the third base star, the enhanced one that had emerged last, hadn't fired a shot. It hung back, observing, analyzing, its sensors drinking in data about colonial tactics and Moonbase Alpha's defensive systems. That scared Adama more than the active engagement. An enemy that studied before attacking was an enemy that planned to win decisively. "Colonel Tai," Adama said quietly, his voice carrying only to his executive officer. "What's our FTL status?" Tai checked his console, his weathered face tight. 7 minutes until we can execute a safe jump. But Commander, if we leave—" "I know what we'd be leaving behind," Adama interrupted. "But I need to know our options. If this battle turns against us, I won't sacrifice the entire human race to defend strangers. Our first duty is to the survivors." "Understood, sir." Tai's voice carried no judgment, only the acknowledgement of a hard truth they'd both lived with since the fall. Command meant making choices that haunted you forever. Before Adama could issue further orders, Lieutenant Gaeta called out urgently, "Commander, the enhanced base star is moving. It's breaking formation and heading directly toward Moonbase Alpha." On the tactical display, the massive Cylon ship accelerated, its course taking it away from Galactica and toward the moon. Not an attack run. The angle was wrong for that. It was positioning itself in orbit above Alpha's main complex. "What are they doing?" Colonel Tai demanded. "They're not attacking," Adama observed, his tactical mind processing the Cylon's intent. "They're preparing to board. They want to take Alpha intact." The communications officer looked up sharply. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Cylons. It's directed at both us and Moonbase Alpha. Audio only." "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was synthesized, emotionless, carrying the cold certainty of machine logic that Adama had heard too many times in the months since the fall. "Human vessels, you have fought with admirable persistence, but continuation of hostilities serves no purpose. Moonbase Alpha contains technology and spatial positioning data critical to Cylon objectives. Surrender the installation, and your fleet will be permitted to withdraw. Resist, and all human life in this sector will be terminated. You have 60 seconds to comply." The CIC went silent. Every officer turned to look at Adama, waiting for orders, trusting in the old man's judgment to find a way through the impossible. Adama kept his expression neutral, his voice calm. "Gaeta, open a channel to Commander Koenig." The connection established immediately. Koenig's face appeared on the display, and Adama could read the same calculation he'd been making himself, weighing lives, weighing options, searching for the least terrible choice. "Commander Adama," Koenig said without preamble, "we need to coordinate. The Cylons want Alpha specifically. That means they know something about our situation that we don't. Professor Bergman has been analyzing their attack patterns and targeting priorities. Victor, explain." The scientist appeared beside Koenig, his refined features intense with the focus of a man pursuing truth, even in the middle of battle. His voice carried the precise diction of an Oxford education, each word chosen with care. "Commander Adama, the Cylons aren't simply attacking. They're gathering intelligence. Their sensors have been focused on very specific elements of Alpha's infrastructure. Our navigational systems, our sensor arrays tracking spatial anomalies, and most significantly, the radiation signatures from the nuclear waste that originally displaced us from Earth orbit." "The nuclear waste?" Adama leaned forward. "What's significant about that?" "It's still highly radioactive, still generating exotic particles we don't fully understand. But more importantly, it appears to be resonating with the spatial distortion that brought you here, as if it's acting as a beacon or an anchor point for dimensional transitions." Bergman paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Commander, I believe Moonbase Alpha doesn't simply drift through space. It exists at a crossroads of realities. Multiple universes converge here, and the Cylons have realized they can use that property." The implications hit Adama like a physical blow. If Alpha could serve as a gateway between realities, between universes, then whoever controlled it could access infinite resources, infinite escape routes, infinite tactical advantages. It would make the Cylons unstoppable. "We can't let them take it," Adama said flatly. Agreed, Koenig replied. But Commander, we're not equipped for this kind of fight. Alpha has 300 people. We're scientists, engineers, explorers. We've survived impossible situations, but we're not soldiers. If the Cylons board, then we defend together. Adama made his decision with the certainty that had guided him through the fall and beyond. Colonel Tai, prepare Marine detachments for boarding action. If the Cylons want Alpha, they'll have to go through us to get it. Koenig, can you coordinate with our forces? Give us access to your internal system so we can establish defensive positions? Koenig exchanged glances with Bergman, some silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded. Transmitting access codes now. We'll evacuate non-essential personnel to the underground shelters and prepare to receive your Marines. But Adama, there's something else. The Cylons gave us 60 seconds. That deadline is about to... Warning klaxons shrieked across both vessels. On the tactical display, the enhanced base star launched assault craft. Dozens of them, sleek boarding pods that accelerated toward Alpha's surface with terrifying speed. They're not waiting for an answer, Tai snarled. They're making the decision for us. Adama's voice cut through the chaos with absolute authority. All hands, combat stations, this is not a drill. Cylons are boarding Moonbase Alpha. Marines, prepare for immediate deployment. Launch all remaining Vipers. I want complete air superiority over that moon. And someone get me Captain Adama. I want his assessment of the tactical situation. Lee Apollo. Adama's voice came through immediately. He was still in his Viper, still flying combat patterns, but his command training allowed him to compartmentalize, to think tactically, even while fighting for his life. Apollo here, Commander. I've been watching their approach vectors. The Cylons are targeting 3 specific locations on Alpha: the main command complex, what looks like a power generation facility, and the area Professor Bergman identified as the nuclear waste storage. They're going for command, control, and whatever's generating that spatial resonance. Can we intercept the boarding craft? Some of them, yes, but they're using the raiders as screens. We'd have to fight through the fighter cover to reach the assault ships. It'll cost us. Adama made the calculation instantly. Do it. Every boarding craft we destroy is one less group of Centurions Alpha's people have to fight on the ground. Starbuck, are you on this channel? Copy, Commander. Her voice carried the edge of someone already calculating attack vectors. I heard. Apollo, form up on me. We're going headhunting. Starbuck, wait. Lee started, concern for his wingman warring with tactical necessity. No time for caution, Apollo. Those assault ships reach the surface, and people die. Lots of people. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more personal. We didn't save these people from the Cylons just to watch them get slaughtered by robots. Let's move. The Vipers reformed, squadrons coalescing into a spearhead formation that drove toward the descending assault craft. The raiders moved to intercept, and space became a killing field of intersecting weapons fire and spinning fighters. Starbuck's Viper led the charge, her guns blazing, each shot placed with the precision of someone who'd spent months learning how to kill Cylons efficiently. A raider exploded. Another spun away, crippled. She threaded through the defensive screen like a needle through cloth, her target locked screaming as she lined up on a Cylon assault craft. Fox 3, she announced calmly, and her missile streaked away. The boarding craft's point defenses tried to intercept, but colonial missiles were designed to penetrate Cylon countermeasures. The warhead detonated against the hull, and the assault ship came apart, its cargo of Centurion warriors venting into space. Scratch one assault boat, Starbuck confirmed. Who's next? Around her, the other Vipers followed suit. Apollo's guns tore through another boarding craft. Hot Dog and Cat worked in tandem, their coordinated fire, overwhelming a third. But there were too many. For every assault ship destroyed, 2 more made it through. They began impacting on Alpha's surface. On Moonbase Alpha, the first breach came in Sector 7, a storage facility on the edge of the main complex. The Cylon boarding craft punched through the reinforced doors like they were paper, and Centurions poured out, their metal feet clanging on the deck plating. The Alpha security team, 6 men and women armed with laser pistols designed for utility work, not combat, tried to hold the corridor. They died in seconds, cut down by Cylon weapons fire that turned their makeshift defensive position into a charnel house. The Centurions advanced without hesitation, their optical sensors tracking heat signatures, identifying targets with mechanical efficiency. They moved in perfect coordination, each warrior covering its squad mates, advancing through the base with the unstoppable momentum of a machine army. They had nearly reached the command center when they ran into Galactica's Marines. Sergeant Aaron Matthias had fought Cylons on Caprica during the initial invasion, had survived the fall through a combination of skill and sheer stubborn refusal to die. She'd led her squad onto dropships that evacuated them to Galactica, and she'd spent the months since teaching new recruits how to kill toasters. Now she crouched behind a hastily erected barricade in Alpha's main corridor, her assault rifle trained on the approaching Centurions, her squad positioned in overlapping fields of fire. "Steady," she said quietly, her voice carrying to her Marines through their helmet comms. "Let them get close. These aren't the Cylons from back home. They might have different armor configurations. Wait for my mark." The Centurions rounded the corner, their chrome bodies gleaming under Alpha's fluorescent lighting, their weapons already tracking toward the defensive position. "Now!" Matthias opened fire, her rifle barking in controlled bursts. Armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate Cylon alloy slammed into the lead Centurion, punching through its chest plating, destroying the processing core beneath. It collapsed, sparking and twitching. The Marines opened up, 12 rifles firing in disciplined volleys. More Centurions fell, their advanced armor proving insufficient against colonial weapons designed specifically to kill them. But the Cylons adapted. The second wave entered with shields raised, energy barriers that deflected the Marines' rounds. They advanced steadily, return fire forcing the defenders to keep their heads down. "Grenades!" Matthias shouted, pulling one from her harness. 3, 2, 1, mark! 5 grenades arced through the air, their trajectories calculated to detonate behind the Centurion shields. The explosions were devastating in the confined corridor, shrapnel and concussive force tearing through Cylon warriors. But still they came. In Alpha's command center, Koenig watched the battle unfold through security cameras, his jaw tight as he saw his people dying despite the Colonial Marines' assistance. Beside him, Dr. Helena Russell, Alpha's chief medical officer, monitored casualty reports with professional detachment that masked deep horror. "We have 17 wounded in the medical center," she reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 3 critical, and those are just from the initial breachings. If the Cylons reach the civilian shelters, they won't, Koenig said with more confidence than he felt. "The Colonials are holding the main corridors, and we're evacuating non-combatants to the deepest sections. Victor, how long until you can activate the emergency bulkhead protocols?" Bergman didn't look up from his console, his fingers flying across controls. 2 minutes. The system wasn't designed for combat applications. We're having to override safety interlocks. But once activated, we can seal off entire sections. Trap the Cylons in isolated compartments. Do it. Anything to slow them down until... A massive explosion shook the base, cutting off Koenig's words. Alarms shrieked. Half the displays in the command center went dark. "Direct hit to Sector 12, an officer shouted. "The power generation facility. We're losing primary power." On the tactical display, Koenig watched as the lights in half of Alpha's complex flickered and died, emergency systems struggling to compensate. In the darkness, the Cylons would have the advantage, their optical sensors unaffected by the lack of illumination, while human defenders would be fighting blind. "Switch to backup power," Koenig ordered, "and get me damage control teams to Sector 12. We need that facility operational." "Commander, the Cylons are between us and Sector 12, the tactical officer replied. "Any team we send will be walking into a kill zone." Koenig opened his mouth to respond, to order the mission anyway, because without power Alpha would die slowly instead of quickly, and stopped as a new voice cut through the command frequency. female, young, carrying the controlled aggression of someone who'd made death her profession. "Alpha Command, this is Starbuck. I just put my Viper down in your main landing bay. I've got a squad of Marines with me, and we're heavily armed. Give us a route to Sector 12, and we'll clear a path." Koenig blinked in surprise. "You landed? In the middle of a battle?" "Someone had to. Your people need help, and sitting up in space shooting raiders wasn't cutting it." There was a pause, and when Starbuck spoke again, her voice carried genuine respect. "Commander, your people have been brave, but they're not soldiers. Let us do this. Give us the route." Koenig looked at Bergman, at Dr. Russell, at the security officers manning their stations despite the terror evident in their eyes. They were scientists, explorers, people who'd chosen the moon for discovery, not destruction. But the Colonials? They'd been fighting this war since before most of Alpha's crew was born. "Transmitting route data now," Koenig said. "Starbuck, be advised, you'll be going through sections where we've lost camera coverage. You'll be operating blind in hostile territory." "Story of my life, Commander." Starbuck's grin was audible. "Marines, you heard the man. We've got Centurions between us and the objective. Load up for bear and follow my lead. Let's show these toasters why you don't frack with humanity." In Alpha's main hangar, Starbuck checked her sidearm, a standard Colonial service pistol that had seen more combat than most warships. Around her, 12 Galactica Marines prepared their weapons with the calm efficiency of professionals. Sergeant Matthias had sent her best squad to support the crazy Viper jock, who decided landing in a combat zone was a good idea. "All right, listen up," Starbuck addressed the Marines, her voice carrying command authority, despite her relatively junior rank. "This is a rescue and secure mission. We get to Sector 12. We eliminate any Cylons we encounter, and we protect the technical staff while they restore power. Questions?" "Just one, Captain," a corporal said. "You really landed a Viper in active combat just to join a ground assault?" "That a problem, Marine?" "No, ma'am. Just wondering if all Colonial pilots are insane or if you're special." Starbuck's grin was fierce. "Little of both, probably. Now let's move. We're on the clock." They advanced into Alpha's corridors, moving in tactical formation, Marines covering angles, weapons ready, Starbuck taking point because she'd never asked anyone to do something she wasn't willing to do herself. The first Centurions they encountered were methodically executing wounded Alpha security personnel. Starbuck didn't hesitate. Her pistol barked twice, and 2 Cylons collapsed, their optical sensors shattered. The Marines opened up, and the remaining Centurions died in a storm of armor-piercing rounds. "Check for survivors," Starbuck ordered, moving to where an Alpha security officer lay bleeding from multiple wounds. Young, maybe 25, dying. He looked up at her with eyes that carried too much pain. "You're Colonial?" "That's right. What's your name?" "Stevens, medical technician. Not security. They just handed me a gun and told me to hold this corridor." Starbuck pulled out her medical kit, her hands moving with practiced efficiency to seal the worst wounds. She'd done this too many times, tried to keep people alive long enough to get them to real medical care. "You held it, Stevens. You did your job. Now let us do ours. Can you walk?" I think so." "Good. Fall back to the medical center. Tell Dr. Russell that Starbuck says you're a brave bastard who deserves the best treatment she's got." Stevens managed a weak smile. "Thank you." Starbuck watched him limp away, then turned back to her Marines. Her expression had gone cold, professional. "That's what we're protecting, people. Civilians who never asked for this fight. Let's make sure those Cylons regret ever coming to this moon." They moved deeper into Alpha's corridors, and behind them, space continued to burn with the fury of 2 human civilizations fighting for survival against machines that knew no mercy. The battle for Moonbase Alpha had truly begun. And before it ended, both sides would learn that humanity, Colonial or Earthborn, shared one fundamental truth. They didn't quit, they didn't surrender, and they sure as hell didn't let machines tell them their fate. Sector 12 of Moonbase Alpha was a war zone. Starbuck moved through the smoke-filled corridors with her pistol raised, the Marines behind her maintaining tactical spacing that spoke of hard-won experience. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the deck plating was slick with coolant leaking from damaged systems. And bodies. Too many bodies. Alpha security personnel who'd tried to hold this section lay where they'd fallen, their laser pistols still clutched in hands that would never fire again. The Cylons had been efficient, brutal, and utterly without mercy. "Contact front!" The Marine point man's warning came a heartbeat before Centurions emerged from a side corridor, their weapons already tracking targets. Starbuck dove left as weapons fire tore through the space where she'd been standing. She rolled, came up firing, her rounds punching through a Centurion's chest plating. It staggered but didn't fall. These enhanced Cylons had redundant systems, backup, processors that kept them fighting even when mortally damaged. The Marines opened up, their coordinated fire overwhelming the Cylon defensive protocols. 3 Centurions collapsed under the withering barrage. A 4th attempted to retreat, and Starbuck shot out its legs, sending it crashing to the deck. "Clear!" she called, moving forward to the fallen Centurion. It was still active, its optical sensors tracking her, its hands scrabbling for a weapon that had fallen just out of reach. She put 2 rounds through its processing core, and it finally went still. "Captain, look at this." One of the Marines was examining the Cylon bodies, his expression troubled. "These aren't standard Centurions. The armor's different, heavier, and look at the processing cores. They're more sophisticated than what we faced back home." Starbuck crouched beside him, studying the destroyed Cylon with professional interest. He was right. These machines were evolved versions of what the colonies had faced, as if decades of additional development had refined them into something more dangerous. "Whatever created these things," she said quietly, "they learned from fighting us. They got better." She stood, checking her ammunition. 3 magazines left. Not nearly enough if they ran into heavy resistance. "Come on, power facilities just ahead. Let's finish this." They reached the entrance to Sector 12's main power complex and found it sealed by a blast door that had been partially melted through. Beyond, they could hear the distinctive sounds of combat, energy weapons discharging, shouted orders, the metallic clang of Centurions moving. "Charges," Starbuck ordered. "Blow the door, fast and loud. I want whatever's on the other side disoriented when we enter." The Marines placed shaped charges with practiced efficiency. Everyone stacked up on the door, weapons ready. "Fire in the hole!" The explosion was devastating in the enclosed space, the blast door blowing inward in a shower of molten metal. Starbuck went through the opening while smoke still filled the air, her weapon tracking left and right, finding targets through instinct and training. A Centurion turned toward her, weapon raising. She shot it in the optical sensor, then twice more in the chest. It fell. The Marines poured through behind her, their rifles barking. More Centurions collapsed. The ones that remained retreated deeper into the power facility, taking defensive positions behind control consoles and reactor housings. "Sweep and clear," Starbuck ordered. "By the numbers. I want every one of these things dead before we let the techs in here." What followed was brutal, methodical combat. The Marines advanced through the facility section by section, flushing out Centurions and destroying them with overwhelming firepower. Starbuck fought alongside them, her pistol replaced by a rifle taken from a fallen Marine, adding her firepower to theirs. When the last Centurion fell, silence settled over the facility, broken only by sparking electronics and the hiss of venting coolant. "Area secure," the sergeant reported. 5 Marines wounded, none critical. And Captain, we found survivors, Alpha technicians. They were hiding in the reactor shielding. Starbuck moved to where 3 Alpha personnel were emerging from their hiding place. 2 men and a woman, all wearing the jumpsuit uniforms of Moonbase technical staff. They were shaking, terrified, but alive. "You're safe now," Starbuck told them, keeping her voice gentle. "We're from Battlestar Galactica. We're here to help. Can you get this facility operational again? The woman, her name tag read Chen, nodded shakily. Yes, the Cylons damaged primary systems, but the backups are intact. Give us 20 minutes. You've got 10. Work fast. Starbuck turned to the sergeant. Set up defensive positions. If more Cylons come, we hold them here until the power's restored. But the Cylons didn't come. Not to Sector 12. They were too busy attacking the command center. Commander John Koenig watched the tactical display with growing dread as Cylon forces converged on Alpha's nerve center. They'd bypassed secondary targets, ignored opportunities to inflict maximum casualties, and focused their assault with the precision of machines executing a pre-planned operation. They weren't trying to destroy Moonbase Alpha. They were trying to capture it. All security teams, fall back to the command center, Koenig ordered. Establish defensive perimeter. Professor Bergman, how long until you can activate those bulkhead protocols? 30 seconds. Bergman replied without looking up from his console, his fingers moving with desperate speed. But John, even if we seal the sections, the Cylons are already inside the perimeter. We'll be trapped in here with them. Then we make them fight for every meter. Koenig's jaw set with determination. He'd led Alpha through 3 years of impossible situations, spatial anomalies that defied physics, encounters with alien intelligences that challenged every assumption about reality. He wasn't about to surrender his home to machines. Beside him, Dr. Helena Russell checked the medical supplies she'd requisitioned from the infirmary. Bandages, stimulants, pain medication. Her hands were steady despite the fear in her eyes. She was a physician, dedicated to preserving life. But she'd also been with Alpha since the beginning, had learned that sometimes survival required fighting. Helena, Koenig said quietly, when the Cylons breach, I'll be ready, she interrupted. John, I've treated injuries from spatial distortions, alien encounters, accidents that should have killed everyone involved. I can handle battlefield medicine. That's not what He stopped, meeting her eyes. If this goes badly, if they're about to take the command center, I need you to destroy the navigational data, all of it, whatever makes Alpha special, whatever lets it cross between realities. We can't let them have it. Helena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. Acceptance of a terrible necessity. Understood. Contact, someone shouted. Cylons at the main entrance. The blast doors buckled under concentrated fire, then exploded inward. Centurions poured through the opening, their weapons sweeping the command center, targeting anyone who moved. Alpha's security personnel opened fire from defensive positions, their laser weapons discharging in brilliant flashes. 2 Centurions fell. 3 more advanced through the gap their fallen comrades created, returning fire with mechanical precision. An Alpha officer went down, screaming. Another crumpled silently, dead before he hit the ground. Hold the line, Koenig shouted, drawing his own sidearm, a weapon he'd never thought he'd use in actual combat. Don't let them reach the primary systems. But there were too many Cylons. Too few. Defenders and the machines were advancing with the inevitability of a rising tide. Then Galactica's Marines arrived. They came through the secondary access corridors, hitting the Cylons from the flank with devastating firepower. Sergeant Matthias led the assault, her rifle spitting death, her tactical awareness keeping her squad alive through sheer professional skill. Alpha Command, Galactica Marines are in the building, she announced over the comm. Engaging hostiles. Recommend your people get down and stay down. The Centurions turned to face this new threat, their targeting systems attempting to prioritize multiple enemy positions. In that moment of distraction, Alpha's security forces rallied, pouring fire into the Cylons from their fortified positions. Caught between 2 forces, the Centurions fell, but more were coming. The tactical display showed Cylon reinforcements converging on the command center from 3 directions, their numbers overwhelming despite the casualties they'd sustained. We can't hold, Bergman said quietly, his scientific mind calculating probabilities with brutal honesty. Even with the Colonial Marines, we're outnumbered. They'll overwhelm our defenses within minutes. Koenig opened his mouth to respond, and stopped as every display in the command center suddenly shifted, showing the same feed. The Battlestar Galactica's CIC, and standing at its center, Commander William Adama. "Commander Koenig," Adama said without preamble, "we're watching your tactical situation. You can't hold that position much longer." "Tell me something I don't know," Koenig replied, reloading his pistol with shaking hands. "I'm about to. We've been analyzing the Cylon strategy, trying to understand why they're so focused on capturing Alpha specifically, rather than just destroying it." Adama paused, and something in his expression suggested he'd reached a conclusion he didn't like. "Professor Bergman's theory about Alpha being a crossroads of realities. We think he's right. But it's more than that. Our tactical computers have been tracking the spatial distortions around your moon. They're not random. They follow patterns, repeating cycles, as if Alpha is being guided by something." Bergman looked up sharply from his console. "Guided? By what?" "That's what we need to determine. But Commander Koenig, if Alpha can serve as a gateway between universes, if it's been traveling through space following some predetermined path, then whoever controls it controls access to infinite realities, infinite resources, infinite strategic positions. The Cylons understand this. That's why they're willing to sacrifice thousands of units to capture it." Koenig felt the weight of that revelation settle over him. For 3 years, they'd believed Alpha's journey was random, a consequence of the nuclear explosion that tore the moon from Earth's orbit. But if Adama was right, if there was purpose behind their trajectory, "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "That we need to understand Alpha's systems before the Cylons do. That we need to figure out what's controlling its path and whether we can use it ourselves." Adama's expression was grave. "But first, we need to survive the next 10 minutes. Can you hold?" "Not alone," Koenig admitted. "Then you won't be alone." Adama turned to someone off-screen. "Colonel Tai, execute the operation. All units, go." On the tactical display, Koenig watched as Galactica launched every Raptor in its inventory, heavily armed assault shuttles that dove toward Alpha's surface with desperate speed. They were packed with Marines, armed to the teeth, ready to reinforce the defenders. And leading them was Captain Lee Apollo Adama, his voice coming through the command frequency with calm authority. "Alpha Command, this is Apollo. We're coming in hot with reinforcements. Hold for 2 more minutes. Just 2 more minutes." 2 minutes, Koenig repeated, meeting Bergman's eyes. "We can do 2 minutes." But the Cylons weren't going to give them 2 minutes. The main blast doors exploded inward again, and this time what emerged made everyone in the command center freeze in recognition of a new threat level. A Cylon Centurion, but larger, heavier. Its armor was advanced alloy that gleamed like mercury under the emergency lighting. And where standard Centurions moved with mechanical efficiency, this one moved with something approaching grace, as if genuine intelligence guided its actions rather than simple programming. "By your command," it said, and the voice was synthesized but carried inflection, personality, something that approached humanity. "This facility will be secured. Resistance is futile. Surrender, and your lives will be preserved for processing." Koenig raised his pistol, knowing it was futile, knowing that this advanced Centurion would kill him before he could fire. But if he was going to die defending his home, he'd die fighting. The Centurion raised its weapon, and Starbuck appeared in the doorway behind it, her rifle already firing. The rounds punched through the enhanced armor, staggering the Centurion. It turned, impossibly fast, returning fire. Starbuck dove behind cover, rolling, coming up firing again. "Alpha Command, you called for reinforcements?" she shouted over the weapons fire. "Sector 12 is secure, powers restored, and I brought friends." Behind her, the Marines from her squad poured into the command center, their weapons adding to the defensive fire. The enhanced Centurion was tough, its armor absorbing punishment that would have destroyed a standard model. But under sustained fire from multiple directions, even it had limits. It collapsed, systems failing, optical sensors going dark. "Area secure," Sergeant Matthias reported, moving through the command center to assess damage. For now. But Commander, we've got more contacts inbound. A lot more. Apollo, where are you? Koenig asked urgently. 30 seconds out, we're... Apollo's transmission cut off in a burst of static and weapons fire. When it resumed, his voice was tight. Taking fire from Cylon raiders. We're pushing through, but we've lost 2 Raptors. Hold on, Alpha. We're almost there. The next 30 seconds felt like hours. Koenig stood in his command center, surrounded by defenders from 2 civilizations, watching the tactical display as Cylon forces converged on their position while colonial reinforcements fought desperately to reach them. And then the Raptors touched down in Alpha's main hangar, their ramps dropping, Marines pouring out. Apollo himself led the reinforcement, his flight suit exchanged for combat gear, his sidearm drawn. "Galactica Marines, with me," he ordered. "Commander Koenig, where do you need us?" "Everywhere," Koenig replied honestly. "The Cylons are hitting us from 3 directions. We're holding, but barely." Then we changed the tactical situation. Apollo moved to the tactical display, his command training evident in the way he assessed the battlefield. "We've been fighting defensively, reacting to Cylon initiatives. Time to take the offensive. Sergeant Matthias, take your squad and hit their staging area in Sector 9. Cut off their reinforcements. Starbuck..." "Way ahead of you, Apollo." Starbuck was already checking her ammunition, her expression carrying the fierce joy of someone who'd found her element. "I'll take a squad to the nuclear waste facility. If that's what the Cylons are really after, we deny them access, permanently if necessary." "Do it. Commander Koenig, can your people coordinate with our forces? We need real-time intelligence on Cylon positions." Koenig nodded, already working his console. "Professor Bergman, slave the security systems to the Colonial Tactical Network. Give them everything we've got." As the defenders organized their counteroffensive, Bergman worked frantically at his station, his scientific mind racing through implications and possibilities. The spatial distortions around Alpha, the way the Cylons had appeared through dimensional rifts, the nuclear waste that somehow resonated with reality-crossing phenomena. "John," he said quietly, pulling Koenig aside, "I think I understand what's happening, what Alpha really is. Explain, quickly." Bergman pulled up a holographic display showing Alpha's trajectory through space, marked with points where they'd encountered spatial anomalies. "Look at the pattern. We thought we were drifting randomly, but we're not. We're following a specific path through space-time, and every anomaly we've encountered, they weren't random either. They were waypoints. Waypoints to where? Not where, when, or more accurately, to connections between realities." Bergman's voice carried the excitement of discovery mixed with dread of its implications. "Alpha doesn't orbit a planet anymore. It orbits reality itself. We exist at a fixed point in space-time where multiple universes converge. The nuclear explosion didn't just displace us from Earth. It transformed us into something unprecedented. A dimensional anchor point." The implications hit Koenig like a physical blow. Then the Cylons want to control that anchor point, use it to access other universes, other realities where humanity exists, where resources are infinite, where they can spread without limit. Bergman's expression was grim. "John, if they succeed, every human civilization in every reality becomes vulnerable. The Cylons won't just conquer one universe, they'll conquer all of them. Then we make damn sure they don't succeed." Koenig turned back to the command center, his voice carrying across the organized chaos. "All personnel, listen up. We just learned what we're really defending. Alpha isn't just our home. It's a gateway, a crossroads between realities. If the Cylons take it, they'll use it to invade every universe where humanity exists. So we hold this position. We hold it against everything they throw at us, because we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every human in every reality who doesn't even know this battle is happening." The defenders, Colonial Marines and Alpha personnel alike, straightened, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of that revelation. They'd all lost homes before. The Colonials to the Cylon Holocaust. Alpha to the nuclear explosion that tore them from Earth. They wouldn't lose another. Aboard Galactica, Commander Adama watched the tactical display with the grim satisfaction of a commander seeing his forces rally. But satisfaction was tempered by growing concern. The third base star, the enhanced one that had been holding back, was moving. Not toward Alpha, toward Galactica itself. "Sir," Lieutenant Gaeta reported, "the enhanced base star is powering weapons, all batteries. They're targeting us specifically." "They want us out of the fight," Tai growled. "Take out Galactica, and Alpha loses its heavy support. Then they'll be disappointed." Adama's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd faced death too many times to fear it anymore. "All batteries, return fire. Launch nuclear missiles. I want that base star crippled or destroyed. And Gaeta." "Sir, get me a firing solution on the spatial anomaly. The rift the Cylons used to reach us." "Commander?" Gaeta looked confused. "Sir, if we close the rift, the Cylons can't send reinforcements, but neither can anyone else. We'd be trapped here." "I know, but we're already trapped. And I'll be damned if I let more Cylons pour through that opening." Adama met his executive officer's eyes. "Tai, do you concur?" Tai didn't hesitate. "Close the door. We make our stand with what we've got. Then let's end this. Fire." The space between Galactica and the enhanced base star became a storm of fire. Nuclear warheads detonated against Cylon armor, their brilliant flashes briefly illuminating the void like newborn stars. Kinetic rounds traveled at velocities that turned simple metal into devastating weapons. Energy beams lanced through vacuum, seeking vulnerabilities in ancient battlestar plating. Galactica shuddered under the assault, her hull groaning, but she held. She'd been built in an era when war with the Cylons was an ever-present threat, designed to absorb punishment that would shatter lesser vessels. Now, decades after her launching, she proved the wisdom of that paranoid design philosophy. "Damage report," Colonel Tai barked, gripping the railing as another impact sent tremors through the deck. "Port side armor compromised on decks 7 through 12, Lieutenant Gaeta reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Fires in multiple compartments, casualties mounting, but the old girl's still fighting." Commander Adama stood at the center of his CIC, hands clasped behind his back, projecting calm authority while his mind calculated probabilities and options. The enhanced base star was tougher than its predecessors, its armor more resilient, its weapons more precise, its tactical responses showing genuine intelligence rather than simple programming. But it was still just one ship, and Galactica had survived worse. "Target their weapons arrays," Adama ordered. "I don't need to destroy that ship. I just need to cripple it long enough to close the spatial rift." "Gaeta, firing solution on the anomaly?" "Calculated and locked, sir." "But Commander..." Gaeta hesitated, then continued. "Sir, if we collapse that rift with our missiles, the energy release could be catastrophic. We don't know what closing a dimensional breach will do. It could destroy everything within 10,000 kilometers. Including us," Tai added grimly. "Then we'd better make sure we're not within 10,000 kilometers when it happens." Adama's expression didn't change. "Prepare the fleet for emergency FTL jump. Coordinates, anywhere but here. We fire the missiles, we jump immediately, and we hope the blast takes out the Cylons before they can follow." "And Alpha?" Gaeta asked. "Commander, if we jump away, Moon Base Alpha will be alone, undefended." Adama was silent for 3 heartbeats. The weight of command had never felt heavier. He was responsible for 50,000 souls, the last survivors of humanity's 12 colonies. His duty was to them, to preserving the species, not to strangers from another reality who happened to look human. But he'd already made his choice when he'd ordered Galactica to defend Alpha, when he'd sent his Marines to die alongside Alpha's security forces, when he'd looked at Commander Koenig and seen a reflection of himself, a leader trying to protect his people against impossible odds. "Alpha comes with us," Adama decided. "Commander Koenig, are you on this channel?" Koenig's voice came through immediately, strained but focused. "I'm here, Commander. We heard you're planning to collapse the rift. It's the only way to stop Cylon reinforcements, but we need to evacuate Alpha's personnel first." How many people do you have? 311. Most are in the sheltered sections, but we've got wounded scattered across multiple locations. Commander, even with your Raptors, evacuation would take hours we don't have. Then we don't evacuate. Adama turned to his navigation officer. Can we calculate an FTL jump that includes Alpha, bring the entire moon with us? The officer's expression suggested Adama had just asked him to violate fundamental laws of physics. Sir, FTL fields are designed for ship-sized masses. A planetary body, even one as small as Earth's moon, the energy requirements would be… I didn't ask if it was easy. Adama interrupted. I asked if it was possible. A pause. Frantic calculations. Then, theoretically, if we positioned Galactica and the civilian fleet around Alpha, I generated overlapping FTL fields, synchronized the jump precisely, it might work. But Commander, the margin for error is 0. If the fields don't align perfectly, Alpha could be torn apart, or we could end up spread across half the galaxy. Better than certain death from a dimensional collapse. Adama met Ty's eyes. His executive officer nodded. Agreement, support, acknowledgement that they were about to attempt something insane, because all the sane options had run out. Make it happen, Adama ordered. All fleet vessels take positions around Moonbase Alpha. Generate FTL fields on my mark. We're taking the whole moon with us. On Alpha, Professor Bergman looked up from his console with an expression of scientific wonder mixed with terror. John, did he just say… He's going to jump us, Koenig confirmed. All of us. The entire moon. Professor, is that even possible? In theory, yes. In practice, Bergman pulled up calculations, his mind racing through the physics. The energy requirements are staggering. They'd need to generate a field capable of encompassing a lunar mass object and maintaining coherence through a dimensional transition. The colonial FTL technology is clearly more advanced than anything we developed before leaving Earth. But this is unprecedented. So you're saying it won't work? I'm saying if it does work, we'll have witnessed something extraordinary. And if it doesn't, we'll be dead before we know it failed. Bergman smiled with the fatalistic humor of a scientist who'd learned to accept impossible situations. Either way, I'm fascinated to see what happens. Helena Russell moved to Koenig's side, her medical kit abandoned now that the immediate battle had subsided. Around them, the command center showed the scars of combat, bullet holes, scorch marks, the acrid smell of burnt electronics, and worse things. John, if we survive this, she began. When we survive this, he corrected. When we survive this, she accepted with a slight smile. We need to talk about what Alpha really is, what it means. Professor Bergman's theory about us being a dimensional crossroads, if that's true, we can't just keep drifting through space, hoping nothing else finds us. We need to understand, to control it. One crisis at a time, Helena. Koenig turned to his tactical officer. How are our Marines doing? The colonial forces. Last Cylon resistance was eliminated in Sector 4, the officer reported. We're still searching for stragglers, but the main assault has been repelled. Casualties are significant. We lost 37 Alpha personnel. The Colonials lost 19 Marines, but the base is secure. 37. Koenig felt the weight of each name, each face he'd known. People who'd trusted him to lead them through the impossible. People who died defending a home that wasn't even in orbit around Earth anymore. He'd add their names to the too-long list he already carried. Commander Koenig! Captain Lee Apollo Adama appeared in the command center, his combat gear stained with carbon scoring and what might have been Cylon hydraulic fluid. My father's about to attempt something crazy. Thought you should know what to expect. Crazier than what we've already been through? Substantially. Apollo moved to the tactical display, pulling up the colonial fleet positions. We're going to jump, FTL, but instead of leaving Alpha behind, we're taking you with us, the entire moon. It's going to feel strange. The FTL field will compress space-time around Alpha. For a few seconds, you'll experience time dilation, spatial distortion, and sensations your brain isn't equipped to process. People have been known to hallucinate, lose consciousness, or just scream until it's over. Sounds delightful. Bergman muttered. It's not, but it beats dying. Apollo's expression was serious. When we drop out of FTL, we'll be somewhere else. Somewhere the Cylons won't immediately find us. We'll have time to regroup, repair, figure out our next move. But Commander, once we jump, there's no going back. Alpha's trajectory through space will be permanently altered. Whatever path you've been following, whatever waypoints Professor Bergman identified, they'll all be irrelevant. You'll be truly lost. Koenig looked around his command center, at Helena's concerned expression, at Bergman's scientific fascination, at the security officers who'd fought alongside colonial Marines to defend their home, at the damaged systems and scarred walls that represented 3 years of impossible survival. We've been lost since the moment we left Earth orbit, he said quietly. At least now we'll be lost with allies. Tell your father we're ready whenever he is. Apollo nodded, respect evident in his eyes. Good luck, Commander, and hold on to something solid. Trust me on that. In space above Alpha, the colonial fleet moved into position. The massive civilian ships, converted freighters, passenger liners, as mining vessels that had survived the fall, formed a loose sphere around the moon. At key points in the formation, Galactica and the few remaining military vessels generated the initial FTL fields, their drives humming with power beyond anything Moonbase Alpha's sensors could fully comprehend. Captain Kara, Starbuck Thrace, sat in her Viper, parked in Alpha's main hangar because there was no time to recover all the fighters before the jump. Around her, other colonial pilots performed the same nervous pre-jump rituals they'd developed over months of running from Cylons. Alan Carter's Eagle sat nearby, and the Australian pilot had wandered over to examine Starbuck's fighter with professional interest. Nice bird, he commented, running a hand along the Viper's hull. Stripped down, built for speed and agility. Everything's about combat efficiency. That's the idea. Starbuck leaned against her fighter, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading. Your Eagles are built different, more versatile, but in a straight fight, we'd lose, Carter finished bluntly. I know, we're explorers, not soldiers, but we learned today. Your tactics, your coordination, how you move as a unit. He paused. If we survive this crazy FTL jump your commander's planning, maybe you could teach us how to fight properly. Starbuck studied him, saw the same thing she'd seen in too many faces since the fall, the recognition that the universe was hostile, that survival required becoming something harder than what you'd been before. Yeah, she said quietly. Yeah, I can do that. But Carter, it changes you. Learning to kill, to make it your profession. You sure that's what you want? I'm sure I don't want to watch my people die because we're not prepared. Carter's jaw set. We've been running from the unknown for 3 years. Maybe it's time we learn to fight back. Before Starbuck could respond, Commander Adama's voice echoed through every speaker on Galactica and Moonbase Alpha. All hands, this is Commander Adama. In approximately 60 seconds, we will execute an emergency FTL jump. This jump is unprecedented. We're attempting to bring Moonbase Alpha with us. I won't lie to you, this is dangerous, experimental, it may not work, but the alternative is allowing the Cylons to capture Alpha and use it to threaten every human in every reality. I've made hard choices since the fall. We all have. This is another one, hold on. Trust your crews, trust each other. And know that whatever happens, we face it together. Adama out. On Galactica's bridge, Lieutenant Gaeta watched his console with absolute focus. FTL field synchronizing, all ships reporting ready. Target solution locked on the spatial rift. Nuclear missiles armed. Fire the missiles, Adama ordered. Full spread, then execute the jump the moment they're away. Don't wait for impact. Aye, sir, firing now. 6 nuclear-tipped missiles streaked away from Galactica, their courses calculated to converge on the dimensional rift through which the Cylons had entered this reality. Behind them, the colonial fleet's FTL drives reached critical power. Jump in 3, 2, 1, mark! Reality folded. For the people aboard Moonbase Alpha, it was exactly as bad as Apollo had warned. Space-time compressed around the lunar mass. generating forces that human nervous systems weren't designed to process. Some people screamed, others lost consciousness. A few, like Professor Bergman, tried to observe and catalog the sensations, even while their vision fragmented into impossible geometries and their sense of up and down became meaningless. Commander Koenig gripped his console, gritted his teeth, and endured. Beside him, Helena held on with white knuckles, her medical training allowing her to recognize the symptoms of extreme spatial dislocation while being utterly unable to treat them. The colonial crews fared slightly better. They'd experienced FTL jumps before, knew what to expect. But jumping a moon was orders of magnitude worse than jumping a ship. Even experienced spacers found themselves disoriented, nauseous, and struggling against the sensation that reality itself was turning inside out. And then it was over. Space stabilized. The FTL fields collapsed. Moonbase Alpha hung in a new region of space, surrounded by the colonial fleet, with stars burning in configurations none of them recognized. "Status!" Koenig demanded, fighting down the urge to vomit. We're intact," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "Commander, we survived. We actually survived." "Galactica?" Koenig asked urgently. "Did they make it?" Reading them now. They're at bearing 347, distance 20,000 kilometers. All major fleet vessels accounted for. We lost 2 civilian ships. Their FTL drives failed during transition. But the rest, Commander, we did it. We jumped an entire moon. On Galactica's CIC, similar reports were flooding in. Undamage, casualties from the jump trauma, but they'd survived. And behind them, at the coordinates they'd just abandoned. "Detonation confirmed," Gaida reported. "The nuclear missiles impacted the dimensional rift. The energy release was..." He paused, recalculating. "Commander, it collapsed the rift. Completely. Nothing's coming through. Not Cylons, not anything. That passage between realities is sealed." "At what cost?" Adama asked. The enhanced base star was caught in the blast, destroyed. The other 2 base stars attempted to retreat through the rift before it collapsed. Sensors detected massive structural damage before they disappeared. If they survived, they're not in any condition to pursue us. Adama allowed himself one moment of relief, brief, quiet, quickly suppressed. They'd survived. Alpha had survived. The Cylons had been repelled. But at what cost? 19 Marines dead, dozens more wounded, 2 civilian ships lost in the jump, and they'd permanently altered Moonbase Alpha's trajectory, severed whatever cosmic path had been guiding it through space. "Sir," the communications officer said, "Commander Koenig is requesting a secure channel. Put him through." Koenig's face appeared on the display, exhaustion evident in every line, but also something else. Cautious hope mixed with uncertainty about the future. "Commander Adama," Koenig said, "thank you for defending us, for saving us, for doing something impossible because it was the right thing to do. Alpha owes you a debt we can never repay." "We're human," Adama replied simply. "So are you. That's payment enough." He paused, then continued. "Commander, I need to be honest with you. We've altered your moon's path through space. Whatever journey you were on, whatever destination you might have been approaching, it's gone now. You're adrift in unknown space with no clear way home. I'm sorry for that." "Don't be." Koenig's expression was firm. "We've been adrift for 3 years, Commander. At least now we're adrift with allies. And Professor Bergman has some theories about Alpha's nature, about what it represents, that suggest we were never going to find a simple path home anyway. Maybe this is where we were supposed to end up. Maybe." Adama didn't believe in destiny, but he'd learned to recognize when the universe forced your hand. Regardless, we need to coordinate. Compare notes on Cylon technology, share resources, figure out where we go from here. Would you be willing to meet in person, your command center or ours? Actually, Professor Bergman's voice cut in from beside Koenig, I'd like to suggest neutral ground, the nuclear waste facility that the Cylons were so interested in. I have a hypothesis about why they wanted it, and I'd like both commanders present when I test it." Adama exchanged glances with Tai, who shrugged. "Why not? We've already jumped a moon. What's one more impossible thing today?" 2 hours later, Commanders Adama and Koenig stood in Moonbase Alpha's nuclear waste disposal area, surrounded by their senior staff and the leading scientists from both civilizations. Professor Bergman worked at a portable console he'd set up near the storage silos, his expression intense with scientific focus. Beside him, on Galactica's chief engineer, a gruff man named Tyrol, studied the colonial sensor readings with growing fascination. "The radiation signatures are unlike anything we've cataloged," Tyrol reported. "Not just radioactive decay. There's exotic particle emissions that shouldn't be possible with conventional nuclear waste. It's as if the material is interacting with something outside normal space-time." "Because it is," Bergman confirmed. "The nuclear explosion that displaced Alpha from Earth orbit. It didn't just generate conventional radiation. It tore a hole between dimensions. And the waste material that survived? It's been resonating with that dimensional breach ever since, acting as an anchor point that allows Alpha to interact with other realities. Which is why the Cylons wanted it," Apollo observed. "Control the anchor point. Control access to other universes." "Exactly." Bergman pulled up a holographic display showing Alpha's trajectory through space over the past 3 years. "Look at this. Every time we encountered a spatial anomaly, every time reality seemed to bend around us, it corresponded with increased radiation emissions from this facility. We weren't traveling randomly. The nuclear waste was resonating with dimensional boundaries, pulling us toward them. Like following a beacon," Koenig said quietly. "Precisely. But here's what's fascinating." Bergman adjusted the display, showing new data from the colonial sensors. "When Commander Adama's fleet jumped us away from the rift, when we severed the connection to your original universe, the radiation signatures changed. They're weaker, more stable, as if Alpha's dimensional anchor has partially collapsed." "Is that good or bad?" Starbuck asked from where she leaned against a bulkhead, exhausted but unable to sleep. "I don't know," Bergman admitted. "On one hand, it means we're less likely to accidentally stumble into dangerous spatial phenomena. On the other hand, it means we may have lost our only way home. For both of us." That sobering realization settled over the assembled group. The colonials had been searching for Earth, the legendary homeworld of humanity. Alpha's crew had been trying to find their way back to Earth orbit. Now both were trapped in unknown space, their paths permanently altered by choices made in combat. "Then we adapt," Adama said, his voice carrying command authority that transcended cultural differences. "We've both survived the impossible. We'll survive this too. Commander Koenig, what are your immediate needs? Supplies, medical resources, technical expertise?" "All of the above," Koenig replied honestly. "Alpha was designed as a research station, not a long-term survival habitat. We've been scavenging and improvising for 3 years. Your civilian fleet has resources we desperately need, and we have things to offer in return. Scientific knowledge, unique perspectives on spatial phenomena, experience navigating the unknown. Then we trade, fairly, as equals." Adama extended his hand. "We're stronger together than apart. So we stay together, at least until both our peoples find what they're looking for." Koenig took his hand, and they shook. Two commanders from different realities, united by necessity and growing mutual respect. "There's one more thing," Bergman interjected. "The dimensional resonance may be weaker, but it's not gone. Alpha is still special, still unique. And I've detected something on long-range sensors that suggests we're not entirely alone in this region of space." "Cylons?" Tai demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "No, something else, a signal. Faint, possibly artificial, coming from a star system approximately 3 light-years from our current position." Bergman pulled up the sensor data. "I can't tell if it's a distress call, a beacon, or something else entirely. But it's there, and it's human in origin." Everyone turned to look at the data. A signal, Possibly other humans. Possibly answers to questions they'd all been asking. Could it be Earth? Apollo asked quietly. I don't know, Bergman admitted. The signal characteristics don't match anything in our pre-disaster databases. But Commander Adama, your people have been searching for Earth for months. This might be your first real lead. Adama stared at the sensor display. Years of tactical training warring with something he'd tried to suppress since the fall. Hope. Dangerous, treacherous hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd found what they'd been searching for. It could be a trap, Ty warned. The Cylons knew we'd survived. They know about Alpha now. They could be trying to lure us into an ambush. Maybe, Adama acknowledged. But we can't ignore it. If there's even a chance it's Earth, a chance of finding a new home for our people, we have to investigate. Then we go together, Koenig decided. Alpha comes with you. Whatever we find, we face it as allies. Agreed. Adama turned to his staff. Get the fleet ready to move. Coordinate with Alpha's navigation systems. We'll jump together in 6 hours. Give everyone time to repair, rearm, and prepare for whatever we find on the other end. As the meeting broke up, the various commanders and scientists moving to their assigned tasks, Starbuck found herself standing beside Alan Carter, both of them staring at the holographic display showing the mysterious signal. Think it's really Earth? Carter asked. I think it's something, Starbuck replied. Whether it's what we hope for or another nightmare waiting to happen, she shrugged. Only one way to find out. By flying toward it despite not knowing what we'll find. Pretty much. That's what being human means, Carter. We're curious, stubborn, too dumb to quit when the smart move would be running away. It's gotten us into trouble since we climbed down from the trees. Carter laughed despite the exhaustion and the lingering fear. You colonials have a strange way of looking at things. You Alpha people aren't exactly normal yourselves. You rode a moon through dimensional barriers for 3 years and somehow lived to tell about it. Fair point. Carter paused, then added quietly, Thanks for saving my life during the battle, and for teaching me that courage isn't enough, that sometimes you need skill and training and people who've been through hell backing you up. Anytime. Starbuck pushed off from the bulkhead, preparing to head back to Galactica. And Carter? When this is over, when we've investigated that signal and dealt with whatever fresh disaster it represents. I meant what I said. I'll teach you to fight, all of you, because I've got a feeling we're going to need every pilot we can get before this is over. I'll hold you to that. 6 hours later, the combined fleet, colonial vessels and a moon that had learned to travel between realities, prepared for their next jump into the unknown. On Galactica's CYC, Commander Adama stood at his post, surrounded by officers who trusted him to lead them through impossible situations. On Moonbase Alpha, Commander Koenig stood in his command center, surrounded by scientists and explorers who'd followed him through 3 years of cosmic mysteries. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Gaeta announced. Alpha confirms navigation sync. Koenig's voice came through the comm. We're ready when you are, Commander. Adama took a breath, not feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. The fall of the colonies, the desperate flight across half the galaxy, the choice to defend strangers because they were human, the impossible jump that saved a moon, and now this, a leap toward a signal that might be salvation or destruction. All ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel. This is Commander Adama. We're about to jump toward a signal we don't understand, from a source we can't identify. It might be Earth. It might be another threat. But we jump together, Colonials and Alpha, 2 groups of humans who refused to quit when the universe told us we were finished. Whatever we find on the other side, we face it the same way we've faced everything else. Together, all ships, jump. Reality folded once more. The Colonial Fleet and Moonbase Alpha vanished from one region of space and materialized in another, 3 light-years closer to a signal that promised answers or asked questions neither civilization was prepared to face. Behind them, in the void they'd abandoned, space shimmered. The dimensional rift they'd collapsed wasn't entirely sealed. It pulsed weakly, responding to forces from the other side, And on that other side, in the universe they'd fled, Cylon forces regrouped. The enhanced Cylons had learned from this encounter, had recorded every tactic, every technology, every weakness. They'd lost this battle, but the war across realities, across universes, had only just begun. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, something else watched. Something that had guided Alpha's journey, and something that had brought the Colonials and Alpha together for purposes neither civilization understood. The crossroads between realities remained open, weakened but not destroyed, and the forces that traveled between worlds, mechanical and otherwise, were only beginning to understand what Moonbase Alpha truly represented. A gateway, a weapon, a key to infinite possibilities. The battle was over, but the war for the crossroads of reality had just begun. Two human civilizations, separated by reality itself, had collided in the void between universes and forged an alliance born from desperation and mutual survival. The colonial fleet, 50,000 refugees fleeing the genocide of their homeworlds, had found unexpected allies in Moonbase Alpha, 300 explorers trapped on a moon that traveled between dimensions. Together they'd faced the Cylons' attempted conquest of a dimensional crossroads and survived through coordination, courage, and the stubborn refusal to surrender that defined humanity across every reality. But survival came with costs. 56 dead. Colonials and Alpha personnel who'd given their lives defending something they'd barely understood. 2 civilian ships lost in the impossible FTL jump that saved a moon. And the permanent alteration of Alpha's cosmic trajectory, severing whatever mysterious path had been guiding it through space. Commander William Adama had proven what he'd always believed, that humanity's strength lay not in technology or firepower, but in the willingness to stand together against impossible odds. He'd risked his fleet for strangers because they were human, and in doing so had gained allies whose unique understanding of dimensional phenomena might prove invaluable in the continuing search for Earth. Commander John Koenig had learned that Alpha's 3-year journey hadn't been random chance, that the nuclear explosion which tore the moon from Earth's orbit had transformed it into something unprecedented, a dimensional anchor point where multiple realities converged. The Cylons had recognized Alpha's strategic value, but they'd underestimated humanity's capacity for adaptation and alliance. Professor Bergman's discoveries suggested that Moonbase Alpha existed at a fixed point in multidimensional space-time, making it potentially accessible from infinite universes. If true, the implications were staggering and terrifying. Every reality where humanity existed could theoretically reach Alpha, and every threat in those realities could follow. The Cylons had been repelled but not destroyed. Somewhere in the dimension they'd fled, the machines regrouped, analyzed their defeat, and planned their next assault. They'd learned that the Colonials possessed superior tactics and the Alpha personnel possessed unique scientific knowledge. Next time, they would adapt. Next time, they would be prepared. The mysterious signal drew both civilizations forward, a beacon promising answers or concealing new questions. It might be Earth, the legendary homeworld both groups sought. It might be another trap, another threat, another impossible situation requiring impossible solutions. But they would face it together. Colonial Vipers would fly alongside Alpha Eagles. Galactica's Marines would train with Alpha's security forces. Scientists from both civilizations would pool their knowledge, seeking to understand the dimensional physics that had brought them together. The crossroads between realities remained, weakened by the dimensional rift's collapse but not destroyed. Alpha's nuclear waste still resonated with exotic energies that defied conventional physics. And somewhere in the quantum foam between universes, forces beyond human comprehension continued their inscrutable purposes. Captain Kara, Starbuck Thrace, had found kindred spirits in Alpha's pilots, explorers learning to become warriors, adapting their peaceful skills to deadly necessity. Alan Carter had learned that courage alone wasn't enough. that survival in a hostile universe required training, tactics, and the willingness to become something harder than what you'd been. The alliance was pragmatic, born from mutual need rather than shared culture. But pragmatic alliances often proved strongest, based on trust earned through combat rather than promises made in peace. As the combined fleet jumped toward the mysterious signal, both civilizations understood fundamental truths that transcended dimensional boundaries. They were stronger together than apart. The Cylons would return, and when they did, coordinated defense would be their only hope. Moon Base Alpha's unique position made it strategically invaluable and perpetually vulnerable, a prize every force in every universe might eventually seek to claim. The search for Earth, whether the colonial legend or Alpha's lost homeworld, continued. But now that search had new dimensions, new possibilities, and new complications. If Alpha truly existed at a crossroads of realities, Earth itself might be accessible through multiple dimensional pathways. And most troubling, if the Cylons could traverse dimensional barriers, what other threats lurked in the infinite possibilities between worlds? What other machine civilizations had risen against their creators? What other horrors waited in realities humanity had never imagined? The battle for Moonbase Alpha had ended. But the war for the crossroads of reality, for control of the pathways between universes, for the right to determine which civilizations would access which dimensions, that war was only beginning. Two commanders stood watch over their people, bound now by shared sacrifice and mutual respect. William Adama, who'd learned that even in the darkest moments, humanity could find unexpected allies. John Koenig, who discovered that Alpha's impossible journey had always been leading toward this moment, this alliance, this coalition of survivors. Behind them, a moon that shouldn't exist traveled through space accompanied by a fleet that shouldn't have survived. Ahead, a signal that might change everything. And between dimensions, the Cylons planned. Other forces watched. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath, because the crossroads had been found. The gateway had been revealed, and every civilization in every universe would eventually learn that Moonbase Alpha existed. Some would seek it as salvation. Others would seek it as conquest. But the humans, Colonial and Alpha alike, would defend it. Because that's what humanity did. Across every reality, in every universe. They endured, they adapted, they survived. Together.